There is a small town in Belgium called Messines. Well, in fact, it's a city. But on the 7th of June, 1917, thousands of Irishmen lost their lives there. Messines was the location of a battle which was a key turning point in the First World War. Central to this battle were the efforts of Protestant and Catholic soldiers who had come from all over the island of Ireland and who fought and died together, side by side. A 250,000 men from the island of Ireland went to fight in the First World War. It is estimated that 50,000 of them never returned. This was the single largest catastrophe to befall Ireland since the famine. It affected virtually every single family on the island. It was, and surprisingly still is, a battle that presented great hope for reconciliation between the two traditions in Ireland. The thinking then, as it is now, that if Irishmen could fight and die together, then surely they could live together. Of course, when the soldiers returned after the end of the war in 1918, Ireland had changed. Due to the tremendous political and social sensitivities surrounding the topic of the Great War, which continue even to this day, the sacrifices of many of those champions of freedom have been allowed to be forgotten. 80 years later, two men from two different jurisdictions found themselves wandering through the fields of the Western Front in Belgium. Paddy Hart, a TD from the Republic, and Glenn Barr, a community leader from Ulster, were both struck by the lack of a memorial to commemorate both the nationalist and unionist soldiers from the island of Ireland. One idea led to another, and it took just over 4 months to lay out a peace park and build a round tower in Messines in Belgium. Young people from north and south and from both communities were recruited and went to Belgium to assist contractors in building the traditional round tower with limestone from the demolished wing of a Mullingar workhouse, while the funding was acquired from the International Fund for Ireland, FÁS, the Irish Employment and Training Authority, and the Department of Employment and Learning in Northern Ireland.
A project like this, where there's a huge link with direct history, where people did work together, but where there was huge loss, and where probably the worst examples of what war does, you can bring it back to a more localised scale, and people can see the positive things one can do with one's life. It is an enormously positive way of seeing reconciliation and seeing what we're trying to do for people to understand true remembrance and to bring reconciliation, and I think that is a very good concept.
On the 11th of November 1998, President Mary McAleese, Queen Elizabeth II and King Albert II of Belgium came together to dedicate the Peace Park in Messines.
It was a day of great pride in Ireland. It's important that we revisit the past and to salvage from the past those very memories that could be and should be shared respectfully as memories.
Lots of the organisation we had then, the Journey of Reconciliation Trust, sort of thought, well, that's it, finished. I never ever thought that at any time, because I felt that it was just the beginning of a whole new ball game for me, and that was to try and educate our people on why the whole thing happened in the first place, and the history of how the 16th Irish and the 36th Ulster Division actually fought and died side by side. And so I came up with the idea of an international school for peace studies. The school basically was to educate people on the whole concept and to embrace the Messines vision, and met up then with Dennis Rowan from FÁS, who supported the concept.
The kind of relationships and the kind of interactions that are taking place here are just not possible in Northern Ireland, and out of that can only come good if people understand and get to appreciate and respect each other's differences. It creates an opportunity for people to move forward.
We always intended, and it was always a vision, to bring back what happens in Messines, in the pubs, in the restaurants, in the workshops, in the conferences, bring it back to Northern Ireland, to the streets of Northern Ireland. And then it developed a step further, where we thought, well, if we can get ex-combatants together, maybe we can bring young people together, and the best place to do it was in the schools.
I know that having lived in a divided community, it can do nothing but benefit the young people involved and hopefully their community.
Wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I actually thought perhaps because it was cross-community they were going to try and change children's perceptions of religion and so on, so I wasn't too sure what to expect. I did realise it was going to be historically orientated.
With the background that the youngsters came from, you would find that there would be little interaction with the youngsters from the other sectors. There's always a feeling in this area, there's always a feeling of them and us. We also had to obviously approach parents and make sure that they were quite happy with what is happening.
This was a wider sense of education. This wasn't simply students doing an English A-level or a history A-level. This was like educating a society which is post-conflict. A very, very important move for a school that's situated between the Bogside and Craigan and Derry.
We had a competition here. We asked students to put themselves forward. We asked them to tell us why they would like to be involved in the project. So that actually raised an awareness in the students themselves. Eventually 9 students were selected.
I put a notice on the board if anybody was interested in some cross-border work to contact me. But I didn't mention that there was any perks involved. So the genuinely interested people came forward.
I volunteered. I do a lot of volunteering. It meant going to Derry, meeting with other teachers, meeting with Glen Barr. Technically, it's peace and reconciliation through going to Belgium and looking at the war graves and the sites of the old battles and seeing what it does for you.
These are people from Northern Ireland, these are people from the Republic, these are Unionists, these are Nationalists, and now let's mix it up and get on together. If someone didn't do it overtly, it would never have happened naturally.
Students from participating schools are brought on a 6-day trip to the battlefields in Belgium, where they are given the opportunity to experience living learning, meaning they are fully submerged in a world that allows them to explore their own and each other's past, present and shared future.
They live in a divided society. They have different schools, so they don't get to mix. And, you know, unless perhaps you do different activities, sports or something like that, it's quite unlikely sometimes that different communities will come together.
I've never met anybody from Dublin or Londonderry, so I didn't know what they were going to be like. I mean, you hear a lot of things about Catholics and how they're bad and all this, but we didn't believe in any of that stuff. Because we're just as bad. Some people in our religion are just as bad.
I live in a Catholic area. I go to a Catholic school, so I have never really had the opportunity to meet with Protestants. And it's not like, you know, I don't want to meet with them or anything. It's just the opportunity's never been there.
Before I went, I had a worry that there might be an uncomfortable feeling between Catholics and Protestants in North and South.
No, I was always edgy. They could turn out normal. They could turn out, you know, to be mad.
There's a barrier within the city. I think it's just difficult within your own community to go out and maybe talk to someone who's seen as being different.
I sort of expected them to be very dour, perhaps a bit grim, but in no way was that, like, you know, that vanished after the first 10 minutes.
On the bus we actually specified that they weren't to sit beside someone from their own school, so at that point we mixed them through, and you heard lots of different conversations.
The noise of them, because they were talking and they were sharing, you know, their thoughts on the trip, but also talking about their, you know, where they were from, the sort of music they liked, the films that they were interested in, and they were talking to each other as teenagers.
I wouldn't say instantaneously, but in about an hour we were all mixing and chatting and getting to know each other, you know, knowing who likes the same movies, who likes the same things, and we're all alike, like.
Because of my accent, usually they couldn't understand a word that I was saying. They thought I was speaking German at some points. They hadn't a clue, so I had to tone down my accent.
They don't see any stigma or any baggage attached to a religion. It doesn't matter where they're concerned. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it may not have happened, but no, they've transcended that. It means nothing to them now at the moment. It's normal and natural, as the way it should be.